Well, hello once again. This is Mr. Tom here with another video for you. This week, we're going to be talking about water, specifically the three phases of water. You've got solid phase, liquid phase, and a gas phase. You might have heard of those before. And other substances can have those same phases as well. I'm sure you've heard of ice. That is the solid phase of water. You've also got the liquid phase, which we know as rain. If it rains outside, we see that falling, that's liquid. Liquid flows. Also, you have the gas phase. And think about, if you've ever boiled water on the stove and you see the steam rising, that's more like the gas phase. So what's happening in each of those three phases is in the solid phase, ice, all of the particles, all of those water molecules, they're called, they're stuck really, really close together. Like they might be vibrating just a tiny bit on a really microscopic level, but mostly they're not moving. In a liquid phase, they're further spread apart, and so they just kind of flow around. Think of like flowing in a river. In a gas phase, they're actually moving around really fast, and they're spread really far apart. So that's kind of the difference on the really, really tiny microscopic level. So we are actually going to be doing three short experiments because we're going to be talking about the three phases of water. I've got my stuff set up here, so let's get started. All right, well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the solid phase, or ice. Now, the experiment we're going to do is we are going to see what happens when we put in some ice cubes in a tin can, or metal, any kind of metal can. Also, we're going to add salt to it, and that does something kind of interesting to ice. So first of all, put in a decent amount of ice cubes in the can here. It doesn't have to be quite filled up there. Yeah, that should be good actually. So that's a little over halfway full. Next, we are going to add in 2 tablespoons salt. This is just regular table salt. A bit of that. Now, you might be familiar with salts in winter because it actually helps melt ice, and that's true. But it does an interesting thing. Besides that, it actually lowers the freezing point. So water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, salt, kind of interesting, it actually lowers it, even lower than that. So light ice that's left over is super, super cold. Now, what you want to do, take your spoon, kind of crush it up, mix that ice and salt water really well. Well, salt, but essentially it becomes salt water, right? So again, you're going to have some that's going to melt, but it's also going to lower that freezing point. In fact, already, my fingers are getting pretty cold at the bottom of the can. Now, I'm going to set this aside for now because this does take a little bit of time for it to take effect. Okay, so we're just going to skip right on to the liquid experiment now. All right. 2 cups of water. Well, I'm sorry, these are empty cups. They are going to be filled with water. We are going to put cold water. Now, just to make sure this stayed cold, I put some ice in it. This is my cold water. Put some in the cup there. Fill about two-thirds of the way through there. That's fine. All right. Now, next I want to add hot water to this cup. So I've heated some water in a kettle, not to boiling. Don't want to get it boiling. Just doesn't even really have to be that hot. And I want to make put just a little more in there. I want to try and keep that even. There we go. All right, now in each of these cups, I'm going to place some food coloring. I'm going to do 1 drop of yellow and 1 drop of blue. Now, as you may know, when you mix yellow and blue, you get what? Green. So what we're going to try is we are going to see which one will mix and create that green color faster. Which one do you think? I'm going to start off with the cold water here. And you don't need much, so I'm going to do 1 drop of the yellow, 1 drop of blue, there we go. Kind of a cool pattern in there. So see, it's just kind of slowly moving, sort of suspending in there. All right, now, what do you think will happen when I do the same thing in the hot water? Let's find out. 1 drop of yellow. Drop of blue. I don't know how well you can tell that there's a bit of reflection coming from the window, but let's compare. This one already turning pretty green. You're starting to get a little bit of green here now, but this one very quickly started turning green. Now this has to do with something we're actually going to be talking about next week. Density of liquids, and temperature actually affects this thing called density. You may or may not know what that is, but we'll cover it next week. So if you're not familiar with it, then don't worry. All right, now we're going to set these aside. One more experiment. It's my favorite one. We are going to demonstrate the gas phase. So what I want to do inside my mason jar is put some of that hot water, again, not boiling, hot water. Let's fill it up to about, say about there. All right, so you don't need a whole lot. Now this is a big jar, of course, so I did use quite a bit of water, but if you do a smaller glass jar, then the same relative amount. You just really don't need much. That's the point. All right, now, remember I told you we need the lid. What I'm going to do is place some ice cubes set inside the lid. Put it on the other side, underside here. Again, we're not screwing the lid on. All we're going to do is just move this up a little bit. Take the lid, place it on top. So, right away, we have a very big temperature difference. At the bottom, you have a very warm layer. Now at the top, you have a very cold layer. Now, we are actually going to be making a cloud here. So think about when you're outside and you're looking way, way, way up in the sky, you might know that the higher you get in altitude, the colder it gets. So think of this as being on the ground. Say it's a very hot, sunny day, but way, 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 way up in the sky, it's going to be cold. So think of this as like an ice layer. In fact, those really, really high clouds, wispy clouds, they're called cirrus clouds, they're actually made of ice crystals because they're so high up in the air. All right, now, just one more thing that we're going to do to enhance this. I'm going to take a can of some kind of aerosol spray. This actually happens to be just a little bit of disinfectant. Stuff is pretty valuable now, so I don't want to use too much. You can also use hairspray. That's fine. But what I'm going to do is just really quick, remove this, spray that in there, and just really quick, really quickly, just set that lid back on top. So it's going to be nice and tight. Let me lift this up carefully so you can get a good look. You might see that it's getting a little kind of cloudy in there. Almost looks like a fog. In fact, when you do this experiment on your own, you'll see, if you peer inside there, you'll kind of see what looks like fog just kind of swirling. It'll rise to the top and then kind of go back down a little bit, but eventually it'll settle. Pretty cool to watch. All right, well, I'll let my cloud build up for a little bit. This should take around 5 minutes or so. Might want to wait even 10 minutes for good results. All right. Just kind of depends on how much water in there and how much ice you have on top and how much you sprayed in the can. But 5 minutes should be good. All right, now next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the lid off and we're going to see our cloud rise out of the jar. You ready? And that is essentially what a cloud looks like. Water in the gas phase. That's my favorite. All right, now, remember we had that ice and salt in the tin can going? Let's see how that's come along. So what you want to look for is you want to look for frost on the outside. Remember I told you that when you add salt, it lowers the freezing point of ice, or water technically. It makes it super, super cold. So cold that in fact the surrounding air, it's warmer, when it mixes with that really, really, really cold temperature on the inside, you actually get frost on the outside of the can. Okay, see how I wipe that off there? Pretty cool. Literally. All right, well, hope those are some fun experiments for you. And as I said, next week we're actually going to learn a little bit more about density of liquids. It's kind of related to what I talked about with the two experiments here with the liquid. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next week.